TRRC. And before we start our proceedings this morning, Imam, you have the floor. If you can offer some prayers, please. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الحمد لله هادنا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هادنا الله الأول والآخر والزاخر والباطن يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي وجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين.
Amin. Shukran, Imam Jallo. Bishop, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Lord God Almighty, the creator of all human beings, the creator of all things visible and invisible, the one who has the almighty power. We call upon your name this morning hour as we continue to sit in the TRRC, and we call upon your name that you will shield and shelter and protect and defend this nation, the Gambia, from harm, from danger, from all evil plots, and from the wicked imagination of the enemies of the land, that you will ward each and every one of them away from this nation. And so, Lord, as we continue to hear from witnesses, we pray, Lord, that the witness that will come before us will speak the truth and nothing but the truth, and that you grant the commission the discernment to be able to discern between truth and falsehood. And we continue to pray that by Holy Spirit you will grant the populace the patience to be able to wait for the due process of the law to take its course. You who is the judge of all humankind, we depend upon your own justice, which is fair. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much indeed, Bishop Odiko. Council, are we ready with this morning's witness? If we are, let's proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, commissioners, and members of the audience. We are ready to proceed. Could you kindly bring in the witness?
Thank you.
I, Philip Saine.
I, Philip Saine.
Do swear that.
Do swear that.
I'll speak the truth.
I'll speak the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Saine.
Good morning.
Welcome to the TRRC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for agreeing to testify at very short notice. And this morning, we would speak to you about the attacks on the religious freedoms of people of the Christian faith. If you paid attention to the public hearings of the Commission in the last 2 weeks, we dealt with a similar topic, but this time focusing on those of the Islamic faith. And during those testimonies, we have heard of serious attacks on imams for preaching a brand of Islam or views that are different from that espoused by Yahya Jammeh. And in those attacks, we have learned that quite a number of imams were arrested, detained, tortured, and some persecuted to the extent that they had to go away on exile. We are given to understand that, in fact, the attacks on religious freedoms were not limited to the Muslims who also shared the same faith as Yahya Jammeh. It, in fact, extended also to the Christian community. So you're here to testify about what you term a catalogue of persecution and harassment of Gambian Christians during the Jammeh era. Are you prepared to go ahead with that testimony?
Yes, lead counsel.
Thank you.
I'm prepared.
Just a preliminary. I understand that you have written a book on the subject entitled Challenges of Gambian Churches During Yahya Jammeh's Era. And that book is to do with the same catalogue of persecution and harassments that you talked about earlier, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what I intend to do this morning or today is first of all to try to identify you as a person. So we go through your biographical information, and thereafter we would take a look at the various topics you have identified in your list of issues. And I have added some, and I'll bring them to your attention, and hopefully we can discuss them. The first is the alleged Muslims' attack on a church or Sunday worshippers at Omega Evangelical Church at Pipeline. We would discuss that. Then the second to discuss is the confiscation of land belonging to Presentation of Mary Sisters in Banjul. We would also discuss the veil controversy at St. Teresa's Secondary School. I think it's St. Teresa's Secondary School. All right?
Yes.
We would also discuss the interruptions of Christian processions, citing as an example the one at Kairaba Avenue. We would discuss the drumming ban that was imposed in June 2016. We would discuss the request for cessation of burials at the Christian cemetery in Banjul, the head tie ban during official hours, the demolition of churches, the embargo on the registration of churches, and abusive language used against the Catholic clergy. I would also add to the list the presence of Zakir Naik in Gambia and the influence he had on, or his impact on religious harmony in this country. We would also deal with the declaration of Islamic State in the Gambia. I have earlier mentioned the head tie issue. And then finally, we will talk about the way forward. What do you think would help engender or foster or strengthen religious harmony in the Gambia as we used to know it in the First Republic? Are you prepared to?
I am.
Thank you. Kindly tell us your full names, please.
My name is Philip Saine.
And what is your date of birth, Mr. Saine?
11th February 1951.
And where were you born?
Then Batos, we call Banjul, the Gambia.
Okay. So, and could you give us a brief summary of your educational background?
I did my primary and secondary school at St. Augustine's High School.
Yes, please.
Where I graduated immediately after graduation in 1972. I joined the School of Public Health. One may want to know why. If so, I can tell why. Anyway, I enrolled at the School of Public Health to do the public health course. At that time, students were enrolled, qualified students would be enrolled on 3rd grade. So I was simultaneously employed as a 3rd grade civil servant whilst doing the course. Completed the course in '74, had the certificate issued by the School of Public Health. There was an arrangement at that time to also select competent students and expose them to the international certificate diploma. That was a diploma. We call it Royal Society of Health. That time, the exams would be prepared in London. They would satisfy it. But we had to travel to Sierra Leone to sit to the exam.
Was it Sierra Leone or Nigeria?
I sat to that exam in Sierra Leone. It was nearer to Gambia. And only 2 students were qualified that year to sit to the exam. So I had to go to Sierra Leone. Got this Diploma Royal Society of Health, came back to my teaching, to my public health activities in Banjul and the provinces. At that time also, immediately after qualification, one of the first things you would be exposed to, they call it provincial experience. They want you to see the country, all the health issues. And it was at that time that the school called me back to go as an assistant tutor. They wanted a lecturer. I had to stop all the field work, went to the School of Public Health. There I was engaged in different types of research work, some of them international, particularly the Canadian government would join the Gambia government and do those type of research work in the Gambia. Then I proceeded to Nigeria to do the Royal Society of Teachers of Health Science Diploma, which I completed in Nigeria, came back to the Gambia.
Which institution in Nigeria?
That was the University College Hospital in Ibadan. That was where we did this program. Then I came back to the School of Public Health, continued my teaching until I had another opportunity to upgrade. I went to Dundee University in Scotland to do the MSc Master's Program, specializing in environmental and occupational health. I returned to the Gambia in '86, came back, continued with my teaching, being employed by the Ministry of Health until in 1988, when I had an opportunity to go abroad, this time being engaged in Saudi Arabia as a specialist environmental health.
Yes, Mr. Saine, I think you can draw the microphone closer to you and sit in the most comfortable posture for you. So feel free and relax, because leaning closer to the microphone, could be a bit tiring after a while. So position the microphone in a way that would make you feel most relaxed. Thank you. So you went to work in Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
from 1988.
1988, yes.
Yes, and what position were you working in? What was your job in Saudi Arabia?
I took principally environmental health, but at one time I was doing environmental and occupational health. This was in Riyadh. Then I went to Medinat Yambu, and I continued with environmental health plus some teaching, because at that time they wanted to train some Saudis, and I was responsible for young Saudis, train them in the field. That was the time they were starting this process of Saudization. So I was doing environmental health and also teaching and supervising a small public health laboratory which we had.
And for how long have you worked in Saudi Arabia?
I must have been there for a period close to 21 years, because I was taking contract in 3 years, signing contract every 3 years. Initially, when I left, I thought I would be back in the Gambia after 3 years. I found myself being locked up there, continue signing and resigning until I did it 7 times before coming back to Gambia.
Saudi must have been very nice.
Yes, some very positive sides, nice company, especially with the Gambian community. We have a small Gambian community here that made me feel very comfortable, like we have a mini Banjul inside Saudi.
And I would take it that most of them, the preponderant majority, must have been Muslims, correct?
I must say all of them. I was the only one non-Muslim.
And you lived quite harmoniously with them, didn't you?
Perfectly well.
Thank you very much. That's good to underline. And you left Saudi in 2008. What did you do thereafter?
I came back home. Then the Diocese of Banjul engaged me They have an office called Catholic Development Office, and I was hired as a project manager. I did that for 1 year and decided to take a second rest, retired.
Wonderful. Well, it's quite interesting experience. Now tell us how it felt growing up in Banjul in a predominantly Muslim society while you professed the Christian faith.
Whilst I was growing up, I never felt I was a minority. That never occurred to mind. It was later, when I started reflecting back, that certain things come to mind. But whilst going through it in Banjul, the different faith, and even people without faith, we all joined together and worked and lived harmoniously. We shared everything with Muslims and non-Muslims. I'm referring here to people whose parents believe only in the Jalang and the Tur, which was not in conformity with Christianity. Yet we have also the Christians and the Muslims. We never have an issue. Perfect relationship. We shared everything. We shared the same street, the same classroom, the same lunch. We would eat lunch together. We would play soccer together, go on our football matches, have our social clubs. We are all mixed throughout. In all these activities, you find Muslims and Christians. Yes, the ratio, it's later that I started reflecting back and seeing the ratio, but at that time, the ratio never affected me. For instance, it is only now that I realize that whilst we had a social club of 22 members, only 4 were Christians. But at that time, it never bothered me. It never came to mind. We lived perfectly well. And we shared our meals together. We sleep on the same bed. That continued until in my teenage. Later on, when I left Banjul and came to New Joshua, whenever I traveled to Banjul, I found it a little bit difficult to come back in the evening. I would then spend the night in Banjul, and the night would be in a Muslim home. These were my friends. Been catered for, been provided for by a Muslim in a Muslim home. But as I said at that time, it never came to mind that you are doing this in a Muslim home. That was the last thing to occur in my mind.
Throughout the First Republic, did you ever have occasion to feel that you are discriminated on grounds of religion, or that your exercise of your faith was being unduly restricted?
Not at all. Especially at place of work, not at all. Maybe in a small way in society where we socialize. We used to have social clubs. After our studies, we would go to the beach, Banjul Beach, and play soccer. In many instances, at the end of the soccer, we would fight. Who would be fighting? Against club. One club against the other. Who is in that club? As I said, if you fight my club, you will be fighting 24 Muslims. It's only 4 Christians you will be fighting. But we would fight. We go and play tennis illegally on the road, and the police will be chasing us because we would be obstructing traffic, and it was risky. But at that time, as young people, the risk, we would take any risk. We will see the police van coming. We could tell at a distance before we sight the vehicle. We could tell by the sound of the vehicle, we could tell which of the police van was coming. And then we would run to the nearest home.
Perhaps there were only a very few police vehicles available.
Yes. They had patrol vehicles, maybe 3 or 4 for Banjul. And whether those names were official or it was us, the Ndongo boys, who gave those names to those vehicles, I cannot tell now. But we could tell, it is Tiger coming, it is Romeo coming. And when we rush into a home, who gives you shelter? Who covers you? Who protects you? It's invariably a Muslim home. But as I say, we never differentiate between one home to another based on religion. Oh, no. That never occurred.
And in terms of religious feasts or celebrations, what were the arrangements?
Still during that period in Banjul, if I can recall very well, the Christians would celebrate in a large extent, a big celebration, the Christmas and the Saint Mary or Assumption, which is in August. These two feasts they would celebrate, and I will say the third one, Easter. The Christians would prepare themselves for the feast. Invariably, the Muslims would come and greet them. From my house, if it is a feast day, I am well dressed. An elder would come and spread cloth, usually hair tie, and I will step over it, and I feel great, and I'll dip my hand into my pocket and put some cash, some money, some coins, whatever on it. Those were Muslims.
So this concept of lalal nala
Yes.
transcended religious lines.
Yes, of course. Then, after the service, in many cases, they would also come and receive us. You have finished your prayer, you are coming out full of blessing. They would come to share with that blessing. And again, too, some will spread cloth or will greet you and even beat the drum, tama for you, celebrate with you until you go home. And the day continues with feasting. After the church, invariably, it's feasting that continues. That is for the Christmas. And for the Easter, at that time, we will have, the Christians' homes will have what they call Judas, artificial Judas, because it was Judas, according to the scripture, who betrayed Christ. So we will take imitation of that day and make our Judas.
Effigies.
Yes,
Effigies.
yes. And then after church, again, we will go and celebrate and beat this Judas, hit Judas very hard until Judas would end up being dumped into the sea.
Judas Doreringon.
That's right. And who was in that celebration? It is a shame today we call people identify them by faith. Anytime I'm coming to mention people by faith, I feel it. Why should I be mentioning by faith? Because we never used to. Boys would go and hit the Judas, and boys would come back. Who are the boys?
Regardless of
Regardless of tribe or religion, across the board. And then we will make the nanburu, which is a form of a meal distributed to your Christian neighbors. And it had a wide distribution in society. You would like to give to any Muslim neighbor. Now, if it is the Sangmari, the Christians would have a procession, and during that procession, especially the Divine Mercy procession, coming from Holy Spirit to Hagan Street, the Christians would be anticipating meeting with Imam Tafsir Gay. This was a reputable Muslim elder. And he would leave his house and come and meet with the procession. And that was one of the best sights. You wouldn't want to miss that in any year, to see him embracing with the Christians as the procession passes. It was lovely, good relationship. Likewise, the Muslims, when they have their Tobaski, the Muslim feast. I can remember very, very early, Imam Lamin Ba, Hagan Street, would be passing by, going to the mosque where we have Independence Drive. And we, the Christians, would be excited to be the ones beating the drum for the Imam to go to the mosque. That was something very lovely. We were eager to go and beat the drum, and we enjoyed it. And he would walk, wouldn't use any vehicle. He would walk from down Cotton Street after up to the mosque. And that was a lovely parade, been celebrated by people of all faith. And maybe because the Imam used to host also many non-Muslims in his home. And these non-Muslims comprise mainly of Christians. Coming from Guinea, they would settle in his home until they get settled in Banjul, eating, being accommodated. Oh, the relationship between Muslim and Christian was so tight. I'm not exaggerating anything. In fact, I'm not giving you a full account of the harmonious relationship. We used to enjoy the Tobaski, the Trrc. We used to enjoy the Afra, because close friends would also roast the meat for us. We used to enjoy the Gamo. And we are Christians. Most welcome. We celebrate it, we stay till daybreak with them. We used to go together with the Taliban, Muslims and Christians celebrating it. Come on. It is only now that you don't find that.
And what changed?
Is that a question?
Yes.
If so, I didn't get the question.
What changed and when change happened?
The social interaction was diminishing. Remarks that were unknown started coming in. Remarks like, I wouldn't go with this person because kafir la. You would hear people making an argument and they would look at you and say, you don't julit because you don't go to the mosque. It is only then, these are very, very recent.
Very recent as in what period? First Republic, Second Republic, or Third Republic?
Certainly in the Second Republic. This we are not heard of in the First Republic. It was only in the Second Republic that they started coming home. And also I must emphasize that it was towards the end of that Second Republic, not at the beginning at all.
But gradually, in the Second Republic, there were some few problems that started to crop up, which people may rightly or wrongly interpret as an attack on religious freedoms. Would you agree?
I do agree.
And it was in fact because of the violations or perceived violations that you are aggrieved about, which occurred in the Second Republic, which prompted you to write a book on the subject.
Yes, lead counsel. That's true.
And what is the title of the book?
Challenges of Gambian churches during Yaya Jammeh's era.
Do you have a copy of the book with you?
I have a copy here.
And in the book, you addressed all the problems you believe Christians were facing in the Gambia, correct?
Most of them.
Okay. Would you like to produce the book to the Commission as an exhibit? Could you take it from? Mr. Chair, we ask that this book be included in the record as Exhibit 116, if the Commission so approves.
Request granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And let me just briefly examine some of the chapters in the book, just to show how relevant they are. But first of all, in writing this book, you drew experience from living in Saudi Arabia, which is an Islamic state.
I do.
And your earlier life in Gambia, which essentially, and mark my words, which essentially was a secular state. Those are the experiences in which you drew from.
Yes, please.
And in the book, that's why you wrote a chapter, brief chapter, on the history of Gambia, and then you talked about the declaration of Islamic State by Yaya Jammeh.
Yes, I do.
And then you talked about the various interventions or efforts of certain Christians groups to address the problem, like the Knights of Saints Peter and Paul. The reaction of the Supreme Islamic Council to the declaration of Islamic State. You talked about Dr. Zakir Naik.
Yes, please.
And of course his effect in Gambia and his activities versus that of Father Edward Gomez, I think.
Yes, please.
You talked about the paper by Matthew K. Jallo,
yes,
entitled The Gambia, Inviting Radical Strain of Islam, the New Political Activities and Overt Politicism of 2016. Interesting.
That's correct.
Then you talked about the Gambian Christian Council, their National Day of Prayer, and then the Roman Catholic Diocese of Banjul, their annual procession, and all the activities really of the members of the Christian faith aimed at protesting the decision of Jammeh to declare the Gambia an Islamic state, and so on. And you talked about all the other activities that also led to the removal of Jammeh when he lost elections, and the inauguration of, or the ushering in of the Third Republic with the inauguration of Adama Barrow. And that's it about the book.
That's true.
So in a sense, a lot of it talks about really the attack, or what you think, what you believe is the violation of the rights of the Christians by declaring the Gambia an Islamic state. So we would come to that
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you very much.
So for now, we should start with the litany of complaints, or what you call the catalogue of persecution and harassment of Gambian Christians. And the first one you mentioned is that on Sunday, 5th February 1997, a number of Muslims from Pipeline Mosque attacked some regular Sunday worshippers at Omega Evangelical Church of the Gambia. Can you tell us more about that?
This church is situated at close proximity to a mosque, and that is the outstanding thing, the close proximity. Ideally, there should be a minimum distance, which is quoted by law, between a church, site of a church, and a mosque. And the people who came up with that piece of legislation made no mistake. They had a good foresight. The mosque had worshippers who came on a special day of prayer. It was different from any other day. It was a special day of a prayer. And before they gathered round for the prayers, the Christian community was already assembled inside the church. One may ask and even speculate or think that they were not even aware of the presence of the Christian community. That can be argued. They spread their prayer mats, which is not unusual, around the mosque, occupying part of the road. When the Christian group from the church were ready to go home, the area, the exit points were fully occupied. And tension and noise started coming up. People who want to pray in the location and people who want to move, to be allowed to move away from that area. And it led to a commotion. And the people who were at prayer, when they finished their prayer, they took revenge also, particularly the youths. They hurled some stones onto the church. Some windows were broken. The police intervened. The police made some arrests. Some of the people arrested in the church never even witnessed the incident, because as a result of the commotion, they had to come in to find out. By the time the police came to arrest, you were in. We were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They bundled them all up, took them to the station, and some of them spent a day or two in the station. And there were unpleasant exchanges between those arrested and the Inspector General of Police whom they found inside the station when they were being escorted in. Remarks like they were identified, or some of them were identified as non-Gambians, and threatened to be sent out of the country. The issue later died down when they were released. And then that was the end of the story, which I may draw up some lessons.
But before we come to the lessons learned from this, would this be your first experience or knowledge of direct confrontation between Christians and Muslims?
These were strange things happening in our environment.
Okay. So this was basically an aberration from everything that had happened before.
Yes.
It's
sure.
And this also happened on an Eid day, correct?
Sure.
That Eid day coincided with a Sunday where Christians would also be worshiping. That is, in fact, a rarity. It does not, it does not happen too frequently that you'd have Eid on a Sunday and Christians and Muslims both praying at the same location at the same time. So this was, and this was in fact the first instance, at least at around that area where this thing is happening.
Sure.
So there was no, in fact, planned activity for Muslims to attack or interrupt Christians, correct?
I don't think it was planned.
And
it was never planned.
Likewise, one wouldn't expect that the Christians would have planned to also disrupt the Muslim prayer.
Nothing was planned.
So in a sense, what happened here was just basically a coincidence of two faiths exercising their beliefs or they're practicing their religions at the same time. Is that correct?
I agree with you.
And because of the sheer numbers of the Muslims and the space available for prayer, they had to extend their prayer mats all the way to close to the church.
Agreed.
And so this created what one would perceive as just a mere inconvenience. Wouldn't it that be the case?
I totally agree with you.
In fact, I have previously heard about this story, and the explanation that was given is that the Christians were playing very loud music when the Muslims were also performing the prayer, which basically created some form of noise pollution or obstruction whilst the Muslims were praying. Whether that is true or false, what is your take on that?
Again, to maybe my experience in the Middle East will tell. I have seen the Pope visiting Jerusalem and passing through, going to the church, when at that particular time, it's rare though, exactly at that time there was this call for prayer and the church bells were being rung. You could hear the two sounds opposite each other. But I was in the midst of Muslims as usual. And we just smiled to each other. We say,
well, Well, that is understandable.
Yes.
But it does not compare to the situation where you have a charismatic church, as it is called, blaring music while prayers is going on. Wouldn't that really cause a bit of attention?
I can understand that. Especially when people don't know each other. You don't know each other and are suspicious of each other. The slightest thing will irritate the other party.
But also we have to look at this in its proper context. You would agree that there's been an influx of churches in Gambia, especially in the beginning of the Second Republic. Would that be a correct observation?
Yes.
And a lot of these are churches that were previously unknown in Gambia, correct?
That's correct.
Because what we were used to were Catholic, Anglican, Methodist, and a few Protestant churches. That's what Gambians were used to.
Agreed.
And in fact, the way of worship that we were accustomed to was the churches using organs and the bell, but not the drumming of loud music and the speaking in tongues and all the other things that we now see in the charismatic churches.
Agreed. I will add only that it's not limited now to the charismatic churches.
It has extended to the Catholic and other Protestant churches.
Yes.
So as at 1997, when this event was happening, you had perhaps the Muslim Eid prayer being interfered with, as some would call it. I'll underline that word and put them in quote, being interfered with by something that is new to them, a church that is blaring music and a loud noise being emitted from that church. So perhaps maybe that aroused tensions.
That would add to it.
Because of the proximity and the fact that the Muslims were praying so very close to the church, the act of blaring music at that time may have been viewed by the majority, as insensitive. Would you say that?
Yes.
And in fact, wouldn't you think that on that basis, it would be the Muslims who would think that their prayer is being interfered with or being interrupted?
Yes.
And in that case, it is them who would feel that their rights were being violated at that time.
That is correct again.
So let's take this issue as one of those minor inconveniences that occurred at one point in time, which was duly resolved very quickly. Would you agree?
Yes.
And so we drop this as a violation of the rights of the Christians. Would you agree?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to the second. The second one you raised is the appropriation, unlawful appropriation, I would take that is what the complaint would be, of land belonging to the presentation of Mary Sisters in Banjul. Could you tell us more about that, please?
This is a convent belonging to the Sisters Presentation of Mary. They have three main locations in Bakau, their main center, in London Corner, Serekunda, and also in Banjul, where they have the skill training school. Now, this one in Banjul is just opposite the National Library and very close to where you have the present National Assembly. The school was there before the National Assembly. They had space for the school and also space to accommodate the instructors the sisters in charge. When the National Assembly was being constructed, they encroached into and occupied a great portion of the school, which compelled or which resulted to the school losing the residential area. Only the school location was saved. As a result of that, they had no more residents in Banjul and have to commute daily from either Serekunda to Banjul. And that continues up till today.
In a sense, the complaint is that this is an unlawful appropriation of property or unlawful occupation of property belonging to the presentation of Mary Sisters.
Yes, a small qualification here. It belonged actually to the Diocese of Banjul.
Diocese.
One may not see the difference between the diocese and the presentation.
Okay.
Because the presentation of Mary Sisters is under the diocese.
Okay. All right. And maybe the title to the land
belongs to the Diocese of Banjul.
Yes. But if on this one, first of all, under the law, the state would have the authority to appropriate land, to, and give compensation for it if the appropriation is for the national interest.
That's true.
And the building of the National Assembly would be in the national interest, wouldn't it?
I agree with you.
Therefore, if in building the National Assembly it was necessary to occupy some land close to it in order to facilitate the process, you would agree that perhaps that may have been some necessary state appropriation or occupation of that land, even though compensation needed to have been provided.
Yes. Sometimes it is the manner in which certain processes take place. If it is in a normal event where the state wants an area, would formally write and inform, send a notice, and give a period, reasonable period of time for you to move, to vacate, or to be relocated. Then you would take that to be a normal process. And when that happens, you expect to be compensated for what you have lost. Okay. That is, again, normal practice. These two never happened with that, and that was the annoying part.
And that was, in fact, the violation as well.
Yes.
All right. But you would agree with me that the violation was not done by reason of the fact that the land belonged to the Christian community. You would agree that the violation was not done for the simple reason that the owners of the property were members of the Christian faith.
No. They needed the land, they took the land.
So
not
this
because
is,
you belong to one faith or the other.
Yeah, exactly. So this was a violation of the right to property.
Yes, please.
Simplicity.
Yes.
It could have been property belonging to a Muslim.
Could have.
And that would not have really mattered for the government. They needed the land, they took the land. All right. So, but this matter is being prosecuted in court, isn't it?
Up till today.
Yeah.
Since that time, this is the time of
our
ex-president up till today.
Okay. Good. So, do we agree that this issue is not a rights violation?
No.
But religious rights violation?
It is not.
Yes, it's just a violation of the right to property.
It is.
Okay. Thank you very much. You raised this issue of the veil controversy at St. Teresa's School. Could you tell us about that?
In St. Teresa, they also, this was one of the first occurrences of religious intolerance being witnessed in this country. It so happened that one day, the students entered the school premises.
How many of them?
Many. With a different type of uniform. The look was different for the first time. They extended the length of the uniform up. It used to be below the knees. Now they extended it to above the ankle. So from a distance, you will know that this is a different school uniform. The school badge, which had the motto insignia of the school for all those children, and they were mainly girls. They were ripped off from the school uniform. So they enter in the school ground without the badge and a different length of dress. And they put on the veil as well.
Was it a veil or a headscarf?
Call it headscarf. Call it headscarf. Covering the hair, covering the neck. And the school authority intervened and asked them to go and change and come with the proper school uniform. Again, too, it ended up with push and pull until the school had to be closed because the school authority insisted that unless the students come with proper school uniform, they wouldn't be admitted in. And those students who gathered some support at that time from the opposite premises, they called them Bilal's mosque, located just opposite the school, also were pushing. So it became a tug of war between these two functions. The school was closed. Government authorities intervened, and the matter was resolved eventually, and they started operating the school.
How was it resolved?
Government made a statement at that time that the school had all rights to stipulate a uniform, and if it is to be changed, it had to come from the school or the teacher-parent association, not from outside. This was how it was resolved.
Was it resolved? Was the school happy with the outcome?
Yes, yes.
And if you look at some of the, let's look at the action of the students. You said they rip off the badge. Did the badge have any religious insignia?
Yes.
What was that?
A cross.
It was a cross. And the school, what type of a school was it? Was it a private school?
A mission school.
Obviously, then private school. Mm-hmm. And which mission? What type of
Catholic mission?
Catholic mission. So, in effect, what you have here was just a disagreement or a protest by a group of students against school policy, and it was resolved by government intervention in favor of the school.
Yes.
Yeah. So in a sense, there is no violation of the religious rights of the mission as such.
Again, too, this is my personal experience, my personal encounter with this particular issue. Mm-hmm. I happened to be at that time with in good communication, good relationship between a sponsor of the school, that Bilal school opposite the school. Mm-hmm. He is a Muslim, a Gambian, a good philanthropist, working in Saudi Arabia. And because he's a Gambian, we associate together. We relate very well. When he had this incident This was a Muslim. He immediately stopped sponsoring that school. And this is a Muslim. He said, this is unfair. Had I known that they are using my money for this purpose, I wouldn't have sponsored them. This was his reaction. And Gambia government also said, you must abide with the rules and regulations of the school. If you cannot, you move to another school of your choice.
It looks like the girls may have been radicalized to some extent.
That is what it signals
to come up with that particular posture. But also, you would agree with me that this issue of Muslim girls wearing veils to school, irrespective of what that school is, has in fact been a very difficult constitutional issue that many Commonwealth countries have had to grapple with. And I would give you one example. In Trinidad and Tobago, for instance, they had this hijab case wherein Muslim girls insisted on wearing hijab to go to school. And the schools argue that this is not part of the school uniform. And the matter ended up in court and, in fact, went all the way to Privy Council. But the tension here is that the right for religious worship, the protection of the right, is with the individual. And the institution is just to provide education. So you have this tension. I think this is a matter that would need policy intervention instead of really law, because what is right and what is wrong is really difficult. The position taken by Gambia government was, in my view, an interesting policy intervention. And perhaps in many quarters that would be viewed as correct. If you want to wear the veil to school, go to a school that accepts it. If you want to go to this school, you have to comply with the rules of that school. You would agree that that is a good decision?
Sure,
but
I would agree.
But somebody else would say...
Would not agree.
Somebody else would say that this person has a right to education in the school of his or her choice, if he meets or she meets the requirements, and has the right to observe the edicts of his or her religion. So this is a difficult one.
It is.
But
even in Turkey.
Yes, please go ahead.
Even in Turkey, it happens. When Turkey, which is, everybody knows, is an Islamic state, but they said it's a secular state, the veil issue came up, and they were saying that women should not be veiled in public spaces, including schools. This happens in Turkey. Yes, it is a difficult issue affecting many nations.
My colleagues have just provided something. That is quite interesting. These are statements of some of the imams about this particular issue, and I'll just quote some of them. Imam Abdullah Fati of State House is reputed for saying, or credited for saying, the following quote: "The fact is that there is lack of proper Islamic conduct in the Gambia, otherwise the veil issue will never raise controversy or heated debate," unquote. Imam Sajah Fati of Talinding Central Mosque. No, let me just continue reading Imam Fati's statement. He says, "All schools should allow girls to wear hijab to school because it has nothing to do with the performance of the girl child. Whether the school authorities want it or not, students will veil themselves by Allah's will." I'll take that again. Whether the school authorities want it or not, students will veil themselves by Allah's will. the veil issue will undoubtedly put many parents into hell if they fail to ask Allah's forgiveness. It is an irony to hear parents lamenting against the veil, calling it a new thing in the Gambia. Such statements are misleading and offensive to God's sanctity. It is therefore incumbent on government to stick to the right Islamic teachings than to fear any mortal being. They have the powers to succumb to good morals in the society, or else fear God's wrath on the day of judgment, unquote. What do you say to that?
That is very interesting and typical of this Imam whom you've quoted. I've heard him even being called, nickname Imam Changal. This is how society view him also, to be extremely radical, and his views non-negotiable, and that he occupied a seat in the State House Mosque, which gave him very close proximity with the head of state. It came to a stage where you find it difficult to identify him and the head of state, whether he was the president or the president was the imam, between the two. Their activities were mingled together. Maybe they were good friends. And this is a typical example of state influence onto religion.
But all that said, we have to put things in the proper perspective. If there would be any violation of religious rights, it would be that of the students and not necessarily the school. Would you agree?
Agreed.
Yeah. And the law, as it is in Gambia, is that the state may interfere or may restrict the exercise of a religious freedom in the interest of public order and in the interest of morality.
May do that, yes.
And your take is that the interference by government in insisting that the schoolgirls wear the uniform, accepted uniform of the school, would be for purposes of ensuring order within the school.
Agreed.
Let's flip it.
Mm-hmm.
In schools that espouse the Muslim faith,
okay,
Christians that go to that school wear the accepted uniform.
They do.
So what would be the situation if they now refuse to wear that accepted uniform? Take, for instance, a Catholic girl attends Muslim high school and they have to wear a headscarf. Would it be right for the Catholic girl to refuse to wear the headscarf to go to the school?
Would it be right to refuse abiding by the rules and regulations, that is the school uniform, prescribed? They should. This is what I would advocate.
Well, this is an interesting policy prescription for government. Like should be treated alike. Perhaps maybe that will solve this problem. I offer no solution to this particular issue. The solution should come from you, and perhaps that is something to be noted. But this is a problem that is likely to emerge again unless it is settled either by educational policy or by legislative intervention, or maybe a judicial decision as you have in the West Indies. But this is a problem that would continue to come up. So let's move on to the next one that you raised. Mr. Chair, perhaps at some stage, maybe we would print out these statements that have been made on the subject and present it to the Commission, because it would be important perhaps for the Commission to pronounce itself in some of the inflammatory statements or strong words that are used in some of these statements that are made. I mean, of course, there's a right to freedom of expression, but equally, it's wrong to really stoke fires when there are difficult differences, such as this one. So we would present it for the Commission to take a look at. So now let's move on to the issue of the interruptions of the religious processions. You cited one example at Kairaba Avenue.
Yes. The Catholic community was having a religious procession starting from Banjul and ended up near traffic light, Kairaba Avenue. They experienced some interruptions during the process. The first interruption was at the Arch, Independence Drive. As they approached, police stopped them and asked them not to pass through. Whilst they were answering to that, another question came up, and they said State House wanted to know what that procession was about. One of the priests leading the procession explained why the procession, saying that it was a religious march. And for the person who brought that question from State House, who wanted to know, he gave him that answer to go and tell whoever sent you that this is a religious procession. They were allowed to pass through. That was the first incident.
And that one, you would say there was no violation of rights as such?
It was strange to see a religious procession and to stop it and to inquire. There is nobody here who wouldn't identify a religious procession. They knew for sure that it was a religious procession.
But when it was explained that it was a religious procession, it was allowed to pass through?
It was allowed. They passed through.
So that would have been some minor interruption,
yes,
but not necessarily.
It is a minor one.
Yes, okay. Proceed, please.
They continued up to Kairaba. At Kairaba Avenue, a vehicle came right in front of the procession with a speed that was unusual. Again, the people who were leading the procession, those in front, attempted to stop him. And he pushed his way, forced his way through, past the first group of, call them elders, they were seniors who were trying to divert the traffic, stopping the traffic. And he passed through right into the procession with an accelerated speed of annoyance and vengeance, and nearly hit a girl who had to be quickly shoved away, but still sustained some injuries. And because of those injuries, the people who were in the procession retaliated onto the owner of the vehicle, who had to run for his life and abandon the vehicle, which was smashed and broken.
So the person
ran away.
Was just a lone individual?
Yes.
who interfered with what you were doing.
Yes.
And the person was taught a lesson. The person was taught a lesson.
Yes.
And,
yes.
And those who were responsible for teaching him a lesson were not taken to court. They were not prosecuted for the assault.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, this can just be consigned to the box of one indisciplined person who just did not refuse to exercise patience, mm-hmm. and tried to disrespect the gathering and was swiftly dealt with.
Yes. The important thing here to mention both incidents is that the frequency at which such incidents are happening were unknown in this country. All of a sudden, within a short space of time, such occurrences start becoming the norm. That's the important thing.
But how many times have you noticed interruptions in these types of processions?
You have interruptions of religious activities, not procession. Religious activities, including procession, including prayer, including the, celebrations in home, you know. And the space of time that it happened, it was too short that one would pay attention to it. They were all signaling to something. These were signals that should have been picked up and corrective measures adopted.
That's right. Any interruption of a religious group in exercising their religion would be a violation, of course, of their rights. But on this particular case that we talked about, was it an interruption on the basis that these people were exercising their faith? Or was this just a person who was impatient at the road having been blocked by a group of people, regardless of whether or not the group were a Christian group or not?
For sure, it was because it was a Christian group.
And
if they belonged to the same faith, he would have done something else, even diverted his course and taken other route.
So you think this is a display of religious intolerance?
Intolerance, it was.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's leave it at that, and then we proceed to the other point that you raised. But perhaps before then, you mentioned this issue of interferences in the exercise of your religion. Could you give other examples apart from this one we just talked about? By the way, this one you talked about, the last one you talked about, the interruption of the procession, happened in April 2016.
Exactly.
Correct? And the veil controversy occurred between April and July 2003. Correct?
Yes, correct.
And the appropriation of the land, or the expropriation of the land belonging to the Diocese of Banjul was in 2010.
Okay.
All right, good. So could you give us other examples where the exercise of religion was interrupted by people?
There was this ban on drum and dancing and music coming from the Inspector General of Police.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is the ban on drumming.
Yes.
Yes, we would come to that. Perhaps that would require a separate discussion.
Okay.
Could you cite other examples?
No. Let's leave that for that occasion then.
Okay. Well, perhaps, Mr. Chair, this is a convenient time to stop for the first break. And over to you, Mr. Chair.
Indeed, good timing for that. We'll take a 30-minute break and come back at 12 noon. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.